everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Mentor Program for UC Irvine BioSci. We're so excited that you are joining us today. We have a couple BioSci alums with us. We have Alice and Matt. We're so excited for you to get to know them a little bit better today. We have a few questions to go through, and then that little Easter egg as well. So make sure you guys are paying attention. Okay, Alice, we'll start with you for the first question. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and your BioSci UC Irvine background, and then what do you do now?
Sure. Thank you, Madison. Thanks for the opportunity. My UCI biosci background, I focus this as general biosci with the intention of being a doctor, probably like most of the biosci students. And I spent about 4.5 years at UCI and did 2 years of research. After taking advantage of some of the programs that UC had provided to me. You go shadow some of the school students at UCI and things like that. And I came to find out I'm not interested in med school. So I'm in my junior year. What do I do? Do I take the MCAT? Do I take the, LSAT? All these questions kind of popped in my head, and I kind of found myself not really knowing what to do, to be completely honest. And post graduation, I went out into the corporate world, and so kind of found my footing with full-time positions, and went on to pursue an MBA. So currently, I'm a director of human resources with with a high tech company in Sonoma County.
Great. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. We'll dive a little bit deeper into
Right.
that journey. It sounds like a longer process than that, but thanks so much for sharing. Okay, Matt, what about you?
Yeah, did a biological science degree at UC Irvine. Got engaged early in research as a sophomore, and that really changed the trajectory and my thoughts about biosci too. Because, like Alice, I came in thinking that certainly I'd be practicing medicine in a few years after finishing my bachelor's degree. But what I really appreciated was hands-on discovery. And that sort of led me to the interdepartmental neuroscience program and then neurobiology and behavior at UC Irvine, which was the Ph.D. program that I was involved with. And again, it was hands-on application, problem solving, which is a lot of what you do as a graduate student, a graduate degree. Um, and maybe we'll probably see a little bit of it as we go through some of the other questions, but the problem solving aspect was great. The challenges of academic research sort of abound, and I found myself with an opportunity to go into industry, into pharma. First with a small biotech, and now I'm with large pharma. So I work for Bayer Pharmaceuticals, but in a medical affairs role. And so I oversee strategy for a novel form of therapeutics. And have been doing that now for about 2 or 3 years. So it's been a role of transition, but it's all hands-on scientific application and thinking about challenges.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Okay, the next question I have for you, Alice. What made you choose to specialize in biosci? And looking back, do you think you would have made the same choice?
Yeah, that one's a really great question. Coming out of high school and selecting your major, I always wanted to get, help others, and gravitated towards science, love medicine, love the human physical anatomy. I felt that biosci was a really good match for my personality and what I liked and enjoyed, and just felt motivated when I was studying. So it was a really good fit. And if I look back now, because I'm not in kind of a medical career, would I have chosen the same major? I still think I would have said yes, because I enjoy life sciences. I still to this day gravitate to articles and interest in health sciences. While I don't contribute on the research side, I do contribute by working for companies that are focused in health delivery systems, or applications on how do we advance wearable healthcare devices. So So for me, I still would pick the same thing because that was my interest. It's just it's taken me into a different direction.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Matt, what about you? Would you still have chosen biosci?
I think so. I mean, when I decided in high school, again, what a challenge. What your major is going to be. My choices were either arts and theater or biosci. And actually, I had this amazing plan that I would do biosci, and then I would go to law school or practice medicine. And of course, none of that panned out, and it's okay. But I think especially now, biological sciences, life sciences touch so many aspects of society.
Hmm.
Um, and, whether it's medicine or engineering, or chemistry, there's always an aspect of biosci. And I think what was great about Irvine, is you didn't need to necessarily spend all your time thinking about biological sciences. I mean, there was enough breadth and opportunity to go into other disciplines.
Hmm.
Um, and really the training that you get, the classwork, the questions, it's it's all a matter of how you think about things, right? It's not necessarily, are you a content expert? So biosci is really a good opportunity to think about problems in a logical fashion.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think that'll be really helpful for them to kind of hear that perspective too. Okay, Matt, I'm going to ask you this one first this time. How did you balance your lab work with your coursework and your studies? And is there any time management strategies you'd like to share with the students?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll be transparent and say I'm not great at time management, but that's okay because
It's a learned skill, right?
it's a learned skill, and if you have it already, that's great. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
Um, But so I mean, I enjoyed the aspect of going in the lab and managing a project. But you also have to realize that core classes and your core work has to get done. And so I mean, I think up front there was a conversation with my mentor about, look, I can do 4 hours a week, 6 hours a week, however it looks, right? And as long as there's that expectation, good mentors will realize that if they have you for 4 hours, then they can use you in these ways, right?
Mhm.
And even as I was a postdoctoral fellow and I had undergraduates working with me, it worked the other way around, where, you know, just be open about how much time you're willing to commit. And that might have to change depending on, which quarter you're in and the class load and whether you're taking more labs and things like this. But make sure you communicate it, because the biggest challenge I had from the mentee side was, if I just assumed that they would know that I had these exams, then it would be okay. And that's not fair. So I'd say open transparency is the best way to manage your time. And then separate from that, you'll look at a calendar and look at it for 12 to 15 months at a time, because the more you can plan ahead and protect your time, it's going to be better for you. And that's kind of the way that, now that I've learned, I mean, it seems silly, but look 12 months from now and work backwards and see where
Mhm.
you need to plug in time, family time, you time, and class time. And then you're going to find there's a lot of gaps in there that you can choose what to do with. And if it's research and activities, then you can plug it in there.
Yeah, I love that too, what you said about the communication piece, right? Because a lot of times we think just because they're professors at UCI BioSci that they know that, it's midterm week or whatever's going on, right? And they might not know that. So overly communicating, I think, is something that's a learned skill as well, right? So I love that you said that. Okay, Alice, what about you? What are your time management tips and how did you kind of manage your
Yeah,
time?
super. Yeah, my time at UCI, let's see, I had to work. I was a, undergraduate research associate for 2 years, and the heavy workload, it's quite a bit, and try to balance that with some fun in between also.
Mhm.
But I like what Matt said. It was communication with my research professor on what my load actually looks like, and also my manager when I was working on campus. It's just going through what the week schedule looks like for me on my end. So what I had done is every Sunday morning or afternoon, I would just kind of look out in forward by a week and see what my study load looks like. And then come Monday, talk to my manager and talk to my research professor just to kind of ask for a little allowance and some flexibility on what that schedule is to make more time for the academics. Because to Matt's point, the number one goal is for you to do well in your coursework. That's always the number one priority, and then everything else kind of plays like priority two, three, and four, and from there. So if I was struggling with some of the classes and the workload and the class load, I would definitely talk to my manager and research professor. And oftentimes you can reschedule your time and availability, and I would just make some of my research work, at least for the project I was working on, later in the evening, closer to 10 p.m. at night. I know that's not great, but I know with students, you guys may be all night owls
Yeah.
like I was as a 19, 20-year-old. So I would just adjust my research time and maybe coordinate with the lab manager and my other research undergrad friends to see if I could reschedule my time to kind of meet the objectives for that week, or that the 4 weeks for that matter. Sorry, Matt, I'm not. I can't project into a year. I think as an adult now, I'm a little bit better with that, where I still follow that same practice. Sunday evening, take a look at what my calendar looks like
Mhm.
for the entire work week, and kind of make adjustments there, make modifications, talk to people and managers to rearrange your calendar to fit. And most importantly, I have to negotiate with my family too, so I can make time for them, my husband and my kids. So it's a lot to juggle, but the more you share, you'll be surprised how many people want to help and accommodate schedules. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I love what both of you said too about the planning aspect, right? Because a lot of times they think, "Oh, I'm just doing this in school." But no, it carries into your career, right? And if you get good at it now, it's a skill that you're able to use for your whole life. So it's important to work on those life skills too while you're in school. But thank you guys. The next question I have, we get a lot of questions from mentees about the transition from academic studying to actually their career and their in work, right? So, how did you navigate that transition from academic biology to your current professional roles? And Alice, we can start with you this time.
Yeah, so the career transition, I would say it was probably not smooth for me. It was not very planful. I had shared earlier that I graduated during a recession, so the job market was super tight. There were probably, this is 1993, there were not many jobs to be had, especially in the Irvine area. It's maybe a surprise for the audience, but at the time, Orange County was not as populous as it is now, with a lot of high tech companies, whether it's in biology, engineering, and Google was not around and in town at the time. So it was really difficult. So I had to, so to speak, pound the pavement, knock on doors, make phone calls, and I took a job with a law firm that was focused on intellectual property. Because at the time I thought, hey, maybe I'll be a patent attorney, and maybe focus in biology, and perhaps go back and get a master's PhD in biology, as well as then pursue a law degree. So for me, the way to learn was more hands-on. So I enjoy the work aspect coupled with academics. But at the time of graduation, I really felt like I needed to work. And again, to be honest, I was broke. So I really needed to work and make some money before I was able to apply for grad school. So I would say the transition for me was a bit rough and maybe not as planful as some of the students are here. I would say, definitely get your internships lined up, because they always can lead to a different opportunity. And it's another bullet point that you could speak to potential employers about who you are, your core values and your core skill set.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I know one of our next question is about internship opportunities, so we'll come back to that one after. But Matt, what about you? How was your transition?
Yeah, so I went from academia to academia originally, and that shift was relatively smooth because I
Mhm,
went from working in a lab to just working in a lab more full time. But
mhm,
then obviously there was the movement from as a postdoctoral fellow after grad work, and after doing a fellowship, which essentially your calendar is really flexible. Like you set up your experiments. Obviously, sometimes if you're working with sensitive cells or animals or however it may be, you're on their schedule, right?
mhm,
But then going into industry, then you're sort of into a corporate environment. So, I mean, what was nice about the first opportunity I had was, there you sort of have to move away from sort of your freedom environment of scheduling things as you would to more of a 9 to 5, I guess, if you will.
mhm,
But even as a fellow, I had control over how to hand off projects and
mhm,
assignments. My manager, my boss at the time, who was a professor, a senior professor at U of M, we had again an open conversation about how these projects would be handed off to somebody else, how we would transition them, right? And so as you look towards graduation and what's coming next, science doesn't end, right? We know
mhm,
that, sometimes you get these results, but there's always going to be another question.
mhm,
So plan in advance, right? You're going to finish up this set of work with your mentor, and then that needs to hand over. Um, and then, allow yourself something that I learned is it's good to set up a buffer time if you have the privilege to do that. Not everybody has that circumstance. I mean, I got right into it, but I know people who said, yeah, I had, a month or a few weeks where I just didn't do anything.
mhm,
And I can be healthy and good. Um, but the first assignment that I had in industry was with a small biotech. Um, and it's almost like being a consultant. So, I mean, I think within BioSci, a consultant position is a lot, very attractive to people, especially first coming out of school,
mhm,
because the pay's pretty good. The questions are kind of all over the place. There's travel involved. And you you don't control your schedule anymore. You're on other people's schedule. But I think it kind of goes back to just set expectations for people, right? Even if it's something that you think up front it might be 50 to 60 hours a week because travel involved and things like that, be clear that you can't travel, during these times, right? If there's commitments that you have to your family, friends that need to see or something like this. I mean, I think put that up. Be reasonable. Know that expectations are high in the corporate world.
mhm.
But at the same time, you should have some freedom and flexibility to protect.
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing kind of your transition and your path. I think it's helpful for the students to kind of hear how many different avenues there are, right, in biosci. And it's not always pretty and perfect, right, when you get out, right? And it's that tenacity and that motivation to keep going that really, makes you, helps you get where you need to go. Going back to what Alice said about internships, they are really an important part of your academic career and help to make that resume, right? So, are there any internship opportunities that you did pursue that you're very, happy that you did, or that you wish you would have pursued during your time at UMac? Is there any
Yeah.
internship opportunities that you did, or that you wish you would have done?
So I was actually heavily involved in Europe, so undergraduate
Okay.
research opportunities. And I think I had a academic year sort of stipend, and then I did a summer fellowship. Um, and I think without those, I don't
Hmm.
think where I am today would have been at all possible.
Hmm.
So I mean, I would strongly urge, even if it seems small, right, that it's just, a 500 or $2,000 stipend, and it's over for 10 weeks or something like this, and you go, well, that's not helpful or beneficial.
Hmm.
It allows you to say you did it, number one. There's usually some sort of written proposal that has to go there, right? And
Hmm.
anytime you take a written proposal to a mentor and say, these are the projects, the objectives that I want to set out for this period of time,
Hmm.
and also, you know, reflecting on your own talents and skills, right? Which sometimes these do. I mean, I think that's helpful. Um, Things that I wish I would have done or done earlier. I don't know. I mean, I think more about the opportunities as a grad student, um, which I mean, I guess even as an undergraduate now, right? Understanding that if you want to go into academic science, that um, every opportunity is an opportunity you should apply for. I mean, I think that was one of
Hmm.
my mentors, my graduate mentors. Um, Greatest strengths is her ability to write and articulate and say, let's just apply for everything. Because the competition, globally speaking, for research is so high that the more you practice, the better you get at it. Um, the more opportunities you'll find. So I can't name something specifically, but
Hmm.
don't let an opportunity pass.
Yeah, I think that's great. Just the apply for everything approach, right? Even when you're then looking for jobs, right? People say, oh, it's just going to be this one job, right? But it's so competitive out there in the market that apply for everything that interests you, right? And then don't let something pass you by. So I like that approach. Alice, what about you? What internships did you do? And is there anything you wish you would have done?
Sure, sure. The internships that I'd taken, because my interest at the time was to go to medical school. So I try to do as much as possible that would help me become a more attractive candidate for the med school path. So that meant, trying to take research opportunities with professors on campus, as well as taking roles with hospitals. And I was even looking at trying to get my EMT license just to kind of get my foot in the door to say, for applications for med school that I'm super focused, motivated in helping the community from a health aspect.
Mhm.
And I would say I tried as many as I could at the time. Some were successful, some were not. But to everybody's point, you just got to keep trying. The rejections are there, and the rejections are probably pretty high because, like we all know, it's a global environment. Lots of competition, whether it's uh, right in Irvine or it could be remotely because work is more remote at this point in time. So the competition could be anywhere. I would say to narrow it down and focus on what interests you. If you're interested in pursuing grad school, or if you're interested in pursuing med school, dental school, or even MBA program, have a story of who you are and what motivates you. And if you start from that point where it's on based on your interest, I think you'll find a lot of different opportunities. But like what Matt said and Madison had said, keep your options open. Don't be so rooted into one aspect of who you think a career that you may pursue. Because I think both Matt and I, and these are examples to kind of share with you that life takes you into different directions, and you can find happiness and great opportunities wherever you want to go. But just focus on what you want to pursue right now in the next 2 to 3 years and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
Matt, you have another comment?
Yeah, so I would just add that um, I mean I think as an undergrad and even as a grad student, there were a lot of things that I didn't know what they were or if I would like them, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I think I had an interview with a orthopedic surgeon equipment setup manager
Oh.
because it was close to medicine, right? It was like, okay, that it gets
Mm.
you in there, right? And there's, things in the hospital that I know colleagues of mine went, they did an internship at a hospital because they were autoclaving scrubs or something like this. I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities that get you closer to where you think you might want to be. But then when you have a conversation, you go, that is not at all what I expected it to be, right? Or um, this discipline, neurology versus dermatology, um, don't be convinced by what you hear by positive stories
Mhm.
because there's a lot of negative stories too.
Mhm.
And some people deal with the negative like pretty well. They think that that's, part of the challenge. But you may say, look, I don't want to be in a hospital overnight at 2 a.m. managing patients. I'd much rather go this path. Or
Mhm.
maybe it's like I really work well focused in a high intensity environment. Intensive care is where I want to be, but you're not going to know. And it would be unfortunate to go 6 years plus a couple fellowship, residency, and then get into that field and go, oh, this is just not what I expected, right?
Mhm.
But we sometimes we put blinders on, and we just run, right? Because we think it's good. So as an undergraduate now, when the stress level may not be quite what it's going to be in a few years, look now, because then I think you'll be little bit more clear to what's at hand.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. It's just as powerful to know what you don't like, right? I think a lot of times, like you, then it can help guide you on that path as well. So thank you both for answering that. Then this next question has a lot to do with the mentees did a class work. In the mentor program where they talked about relationship building with their professors. And it came up a lot that it's not what you know, it's who you know, kind of in today's society, right? So, how did you both build relationships with your professors and mentors throughout your school career? And then, how have those connections helped you now in your career? And Alice, we can start with you on this one.
Sure, sure. I had a strange way of meeting my professor and became my coach and mentor. I played basketball co-ed at UCI, a lot of the pickup games that was during the lunch hour and also just in the evenings. And so that's actually how I met him, was on the
Hmm.
basketball court.
Oh,
So there's
wow.
yeah, so I know it looks very odd that I would actually play basketball, but I used to be athletic, and so that's kind of how I met him, and so it was a different setting, and maybe it was a more relaxed environment where you're not in the large lecture halls, or I'm going to his office, asking for an internship or research opportunity just to work in his lab. I met him on, playing basketball. So he saw me in a loose, comfortable setting, and I saw him not so much as a professor. You do recognize that these are, it was 1920. These are adults, so you're not quite sure who they are and what
Mhm.
role and position they hold in the university. They could be a professor, or they could be somebody that worked in administration. You have no idea, but the interest was, hey, you want to play basketball? And he would give us tips, because I was on a girls team and then try to play on a co-ed team. That's he mainly played with the men's, but I would just say, go around campus, see
Mhm.
who's there, and maybe it could be in a lunch line, or on a basketball court. But it turned out we had a very good relationship, and that kind of opened my eyes to not being so intimidated by the professor. They are humans. At the time, I think looking back, he was probably in his mid to late 30s, so he looked more like a college student. So I didn't know that, and but it helped me kind of realize everybody's human. Everybody wants to help each other out. I shouldn't be so intimidated by an authority figure, because they're there to learn. I have something to contribute from the level that I'm at, and just to kind of raise questions, be curious, lean in and learn more about their research, share a little bit more about your personal interests and motivators. And we were able to forge a pretty good relationship during UCI. And then after I graduated from college, I continued to keep in touch with him, and he actually left UCI to teach at a different university. So still kept in contact, and he was, one of my references when I applied to business school. So that
Mhm.
relationship has really helped, and it continued post graduation.
Wow, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing. It's just that organic connection, right? And I love the piece of you never know who you're standing behind in the lunch line, right? Just ask the question and put yourself out there. So thanks for sharing that, Alice. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't meet my first mentor over basketball, but it was it was sort of just a one-off opportunity. I think there were seminars in the afternoon where you could learn about activities ongoing at Irvine, right? So I had like a few minutes, so I went in and I sat down, and it was sort of he was in anatomy neurobiology, so it was sort of an anatomy discussion, and I thought it was really cool, and again, don't feel intimidated. Just go up and have a conversation. And from that, it was like, oh yeah, we've got some projects ongoing, and if you're interested, then let's have a chat. Um, but I mean, that sort of interaction, and really, as Alice said, you know, I sort of make a joke of it. Like even the person mopping the floor might be relevant to your future career.
Hmm.
And I think as uh, a point in humanity, right? Be kind to everybody, first of
Hmm.
all,
Yep.
because I mean, even the person mopping the floor question years later, there was somebody who I had a conversation with as I was eating a sandwich in a hospital who was indeed moving the trash or something like this, janitorial. Um, and I needed to get into a corridor of the hospital, which I didn't have access for. I was running late to an appointment, but they gave me access because I had had a conversation with them. Now, maybe they would have done it otherwise, but then that conversation was relevant to the means at the time. But Madison, I think even the conversation that you and I had, sort of learning about the Dunlop schools, opportunities moving forward, it was
Hmm.
because I had a relationship with Dr. LaFurla
Hmm.
with the IMP program, and
Hmm.
he was introduced to me by my mentor as an undergrad, and so like everything just leads to something else, even if at the time I would have thought this is just somebody else. I don't know if this conversation is going to mean anything. I said
Hmm.
something silly. I made a dumb joke. Like, whatever it may be, make yourself known to people, right?
Hmm.
There's obviously smaller classes that, you can do this in, but in a lecture hall, your performance on a midterm or a final exam, nobody's going to care. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe to be controversial, but if you ask a good question, if you're in office hours, um, especially if it's a pursuit that in a class you go that they presented a slide on their research, and that was really cool, and I
Hmm.
had sort of just a question about it. I mean, ask, engage, and put yourself out there, because it just connects one to another. To take it further, my undergraduate mentor was who introduced me to my postdoctoral fellow
Hmm.
mentor. The One of the graduate students in that lab ended up working for a pharmaceutical company, which was the biotech that I ended up working for first in industry. My Somebody who taught me how to do PCR as an undergraduate worked for Bayer Pharmaceuticals. So when my opportunity with the biotech wrapped up, we chatted, and he said there's an opportunity that's opening up at Bayer, so you should think about moving over to oncology. So
Wow.
it's just you never know. Like it's incredible. Sometimes I just laughed how silly it is.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you both for sharing because it is really, it's who you know, right? And putting yourself out there might seem a little bit scary, but the rewards from that are exponential. And thanks for sharing, Matt, our connection too, right? If you didn't have all of those connections lead to Dean LaFurla and then my connection with him, might not be sitting here on the panel. So thank you so much for kind of going into depth on that. I think it's a really important thing for students to realize. So we have time for a couple more questions, but first I wanted to do a quick plug and our Easter egg for today. For the mentees, if you do come to our next meeting, please come up to Vanita or I and say, I love BioSci, and we have a couple gift cards for the first 10 people that show up that day. So please come and do that. Okay, I have two more questions for you guys. The first one is surrounding GPA. So that is a big stressor, right, for undergrad students is GPA. How important is it to get into grad school or your first job? So that is my question for you. Was it really important to secure your first job, your GPA? And were there other factors that actually played a bigger role in it, things that they should be focusing on other than GPA for grad school or your first career? And Matt, let's start with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, my GPA wasn't great. Um, so I would say, from my perspective, always do the best you can to
Mhm,
have a GPA that reflects your capacity and ability to do work, right?
mhm,
Um, but at the same time, if you know that it's not a top 10% GPA, that there's a reason for it, that there's a story.
mhm,
I mean, I think I've actually learned more from my wife who interviews for an MBA program
mhm,
that if you have a GPA that looks troubling, or there's an aspect or grade on your transcript that you think, gosh, that C in that class really looks bad, especially since I'm
mhm.
applying for something that has that word in the title or something like
Sure.
that. If you have a story why it looks that way, and you're confident about that you could do better in another scenario in another time, I think people are really willing to hear you out. And then on the other side, if I think the most important thing is the diversity in your training, right? So your
Mhm,
GPA is one number, it's one aspect to your overall performance.
mhm,
I don't think I've looked at my transcript in 10 years.
mhm,
And it wasn't super essential for anything after grad school. I know that's not everybody's situation,
mhm,
um, but you know, your ability to contribute to a team, to a project, um, that's a lot more important than your GPA. Now,
mhm.
head to head, a candidate with a better GPA, equivalent experience, it's going to be higher, but don't let it stress you out. Don't get so focused on the point twos or the point eights that separate you from somebody else.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Alice, what about you?
I would say the same with Matt. I think when I graduated, the topic of GPA really never came up. Granted, I was not in academia focused, research based. However, in corporate, I am a hiring manager and I do look at resumes of students for engineering programs. And so depending on the hiring manager, that could be important. So that is something to consider. And my recommendation, similar to Matt, if your GPA, I would say, is on, below a 3.0, the recommendation is always don't put your GPA on your resume.
Mhm,
And if they ask, but to Matt's point, have your story locked up into why the GPA may not be at a 3.0. It doesn't mean that you will not be successful in your career or you're not going to get that job. It could be they just want to learn a little bit more. I think we all know UCI curriculum is very rigorous. When I applied and graduated, it was probably not as highly ranked as
mhm,
UCI is currently and now. So you have to remember your skill sets and what got you into the program is you're exceptional. You're one of the top students, I would say, nationally and internationally. So employers know that, and I would say give yourself a little bit of a grace.
mhm,
Always finishing at a 3.8 and above, because I know that was kind of everybody, all the students, the peer groups were pushing you to have a 3.7, 3.8. You're a loser if you don't have that. I have those soundtracks in my head from,
mhm,
when this question pops up. But just know in the real working world, it's important, but not as important as you think it is. It's more about your personality, what you bring to the table, your problem solving and critical thinking. I do have to say, I'm not in the pursuits of what you guys are looking at, but in corporate and in a non-science background, I would say my UCI degree comes in every single day when I'm problem solving for executive leadership, people management, and also managers and leaders across the companies I've worked for. It's invaluable. So I would say give yourself a little bit of a break. You will do fine. I got into USC Business School with
Mhm.
my GPA. It wasn't probably the highest to get into med school, and I recognize that. But it helped me go into be successful in a different career path. And you will get into grad school.
Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing that. I think that it's always good to hear that motivation, right? And kind of put it in perspective in the real world and what's really important, right? So I have one more question for you guys, and it kind of centers around the career paths within biosci. And I know we mentioned earlier that I was super excited you both were going to be on this panel because it's not that traditional doctor or dentist career path that we see a lot of times in the School of Biological Sciences. So what are some other career paths you've seen your fellow biosci graduates take, even if they might not be a super obvious biosci career? Alice, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. Some of my friends that we went the non-traditional route. If you guys are interested in research but not want to perform very heavy research, when I worked in medical devices, there was a career path for um, regulatory specialists and also clinical managers. And so that usually involves a lot of research, biostats background, and you could continue with the health sciences, but work in a different function and different department. So some of my friends went into that direction, which I thought was pretty interesting because all of the research data supports, what Matt's doing and his pharmaceutical research branch, and then also same thing in medical devices. And I know in the Irvine area, there are several med device companies locally, and that could be an interesting career field for some of you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Matt, what about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the people I'm connected to on LinkedIn that I went to school with, right? So there's individuals who went through and did veterinary school
Mm,
and are now practicing vets. One in an academic setting, one in a community setting.
mm,
Um, a forensic scientist that ended up in industry, a patent attorney, um, a patent attorney who's now a consultant, um, a, um, a defense contractor. So there's so many different ways that you can go. I mean, I think speaking from like individuals who I work with on a daily basis, right? So in a pharma company, you've got lots of different functions. So, Alice mentioned regulatory. So
mm,
regulatory is, you're working with the scientific concept, but you're really formalizing interactions with government agencies, which requires a completely different mindset than somebody who's like lab-based or working on clinical development. Um, we also I work with scientific communication folks quite a bit. And so if you're biosci, but you just really love sketching and drawing and graphic design and things like that. I mean, we need people like that. I mean, in fact, the way that you're able to communicate science, if you're a communicator, right,
mm,
that will be and will continue to be, I think, for the foreseeable future, something that we rely heavy on in medicine. So if you
mm,
understand science and you can communicate it graphically, verbally, I think there's an opportunity there. Um, there's this thing that I think may just disappear someday, but right now, if you can write and you can write well,
mm,
I mean that's really important. So we rely heavily on medical writers for processing documents because I mean on my other screen over here I have a document that's 1,200 pages long and it's just clinical data. So we need people that actually can take that, put it in a document that then we can submit.
mm,
So there's clinical project managers. If you really like biology, but what you find is that you spend most of your time rewriting your notes and organizing everything into chapters and diagrams because that's the way that you process information well. A good clinical project manager that can organize things and make sure that
mm.
patients are getting treated on time on a clinical trial schedule. I mean, I can't do that. So if you can do it, there's definitely a need for it. So um, think about your own personal skills and interests and just put in biosci because
Mm.
there's likely a role out there for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's definitely great for the students to hear that there's so many options, right? You went through, Matt, just your LinkedIn
Right.
friends, right, on there, and there's so many different career paths within biosci. So thank you. And thank you both for being on our mentor panel today. You guys shared so much great information for academic life, career advice. We also learned some time management skills and the importance of your connections and meeting your professors on the basketball court, right, Alice? Or just the organic meetings that really do make your experience here. So, is there any final things you'd like to share with the students or final tips and tricks to kind of get through the next 4 years and then and beyond? Matt, do you want to, any other final things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say continue to focus on what you're doing now. Don't think, where am I going to be in 10 years because I don't have it figured out yet. Because maybe the opportunity just hasn't come to you yet, right?
Mhm.
But be willing to explore, um, ask questions. You know, whether it's myself when I was a postdoctoral fellow or even a grad student, and even now, right, in industry, if somebody reaches out to me, says, "Hey, I've got a question about this, what you're doing." It's great because really at work, we're all doing the same thing, so we bore each other. So if somebody wants me to tell them about what I do, it's exciting. It's a good opportunity.
Mhm.
So, most of the time, people are really happy to do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Alice, what about you?
Yeah, my parting words, schedule in time for fun.
Mhm.
I know that the rigors, I have a college student also, so I'm a parent trying to drill him into focusing on academics, but have fun for yourself, take a break, enjoy your friendships. These 4 years, or well, 5 years will go by extremely quickly. So just make time for yourself. Enjoy the beautiful, Southern California weather.
Mhm.
Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar, go take a sailing class. They offer it at UCI. Just don't forget all the fun parts of your academic journey right now. Make time for yourself.
Yeah, thank you both. Those are great reminders for them. So thanks again for your time today and being on the mentor panel. We really appreciate it. We hope to do another one again soon. And thanks for the mentees for tuning in.
Thanks, man.